Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello and welcome to Self-Improvement Atlas, the personal science insight podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Aditi Kutty. Let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to our show. I'm your host, Aditi Kutty, and today I'm joined by holistic and integrative nutritionist, Nathan McCullough. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nathan.
You're very welcome. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you. Do you mind introducing yourself and telling us what you do?
Sure. My name is Nathan McCullough, and I am an integrative nutritionist and a holistic health coach. So in terms of nutritionist, an integrative nutritionist is someone that doesn't work with just food. They integrate a lot of different modalities. And a holistic health coach is someone that focuses on like the whole person instead of working in sort of compartmentalizing specific aspects of health or anything like that, right? So it's an integrative and a holistic approach to wellness.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about, your approach to wellness and nutrition and physical health in general in a bit. But before we kind of get into that, we have a segment called Have You Met Nathan McCullough, in which I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, and you don't have to think too much about it, just first thing that comes to your head. We're going to get to know you real quick before we get into the meat of the episode. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Cool. So what is your favorite book?
My favorite book. So I have, there are two of them. One is from essentially my childhood, and it was the one that kind of shaped my early childhood, teenage years. And that is, it's The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, and The Lord of the Rings, and kind of that whole book series that's around that. My mom read The Hobbit to my brother and I when I was young, and it really sparked my imagination. It was something I fell in love with, the whole like lore, Middle Earth, all of that. So
it's
still
so
something
easy to
that
fall
I'm
in
very,
love with.
yeah, still something I'm passionate about. And then in my book, Being in Time is another book. So I have actually a master's degree in philosophy and started a PhD program in philosophy at Southern Illinois before the financial collapse in 2008. So the kind of the second half of my life has been really dominated by I don't want to say obsession, but a passion for philosophy. And Being in Time is a book written by Martin Heidegger, and it has really shaped the way that I think about health actually as well.
Mm-hmm. What about your favorite movie?
My favorite movie is a movie called Wedding Crashers, which is a comedy. It's a comedy with Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson, and I've seen the movie many, many, many times.
Yeah, Wedding Crashers is definitely definitely a classic. What's your favorite podcast or a podcast you listen to frequently?
Well, I'm obsessed with podcasts. I think that long form conversations like this and ones that we find on podcasts and YouTube are really the future of education. Oh my gosh, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So Aubrey Marcus is one that comes to mind. So he's someone that's been had a huge influence on me. So Aubrey Marcus podcast, and yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. One is better than none. What's a famous role model that you have looked up to?
A famous role model that I've looked up to. I mean, I grew up watching sports a lot. So Cal Ripken, I'm from Baltimore area, and he was the Iron Man. He had the longest streak of not missing any games. And so that huge influence on me on not needing to be the best, but showing up every day.
Right. I'm not from America. What sport is that?
He's a baseball player.
Baseball. Gotcha. Right. That puts things into perspective.
Got
Um,
it.
what was the last course you've completed?
The last course I completed, I mean, I do a lot. I do courses all the time. So ongoing education is something I'm big into. I got my master's from Kent State in Ohio in 2008. I got my health coaching certification from a company called Holistic MBA in 2014, probably. So those are probably the last two certified programs that I've completed.
Right. Awesome. All right. That concludes our segment where we got to know you. And I think we know you significantly. So
Great.
let's move on, I guess, to the main topic, which is where we talk about physical health and how you approach it from a holistic perspective.
Okay.
First, I wanted to ask, how would you define personal development?
I mean, personal development is a concept. I mean, so for me, personal development is kind of the process of diving deeper and discovering who you are. I've been coaching people for over a decade now, and one thing that is constant is that everybody has a kind of narrative or story about who they are,
Yeah.
about who other people are, the way that the world is. And for me, personal development is the process of kind of shedding more and more awareness on those things so that things that are not in your view begin to come in view. So the process of kind of deepening your own self-awareness. So that's, I think, how I would define personal development.
It's kind of like knowing more about yourself helps you expand your horizons,
Yeah,
almost.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you feel are kind of the biggest challenges with regards to personal development?
Uh, okay. So this is a question I talk about a lot because I
Hmm.
am a huge proponent of personal development. And I also believe that there are significant challenges that can come into it. One of the
Hmm.
biggest ones is focusing on personal development as a coping mechanism, right? So a lot of people will get into personal development because they want to grow and they want more out of life and they want to be able to understand themselves better. And
Hmm.
then there's kind of a gray area where personal development can, not for everyone, but it can start to become a crutch where you're reading books, you're listening to audios, you're going to courses, and you're not applying what you're learning. Right? There's
Mm.
a difference between understanding something conceptually and having a breakthrough or a transformation, right? And that those a breakthrough or a transformation is only something that happens through the repeated application of a concept. So that's the biggest thing that I see is a lot of times people will get mired in just continuing to do personal development and
Mm.
not actually focusing on application.
Yeah, actually, when you put it that way, that's something that I have experienced in the past as well, where like I will learn about how to improve myself when I'm in a tough spot as a means to kind of feel like I have control over the situation. Almost. Is that something that you found a lot when talking to people?
Yeah, I mean, I think control is a big thing for a lot of people. And oftentimes the illusion of control can be very, very attractive for people. So
Mm-hmm.
they will do this work and it gives them a sense of power, which is important.
Hmm.
Um, but control is not something that we'll ever have, really, right? So
Yeah.
when it becomes about that, you start chasing something versus empowerment is you don't need the thing that you're running towards, right?
Hmm.
You're using something and you're being used by the personal development versus having it be something that you're chasing. And that in that sense, it's you're trying to fill a void versus create
Mm-hmm.
something, and that's a challenge. I'll give you an example. So I'm someone that's been in long term recovery from addiction, right? That's kind of how I got into the holistic wellness field, and personal development was something that helped me get out of a rut that I was in my life,
Hmm.
and it also became a tool that I used to kind of fix myself.
Hmm.
And that's when personal development can kind of turn on itself, when you start trying to fix something that's broken versus, you know, just accept yourself the way that you are and
Right. Yeah.
strive for more.
Right. Yeah. So it should kind of be less a frantic, putting a band-aid on things and more just a gradual improvement of self and a gradual growth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with an awareness that there's nothing wrong with you, right? We can all get better, and we
Yeah.
can all get more skilled, and we can all become more self-aware, but that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you.
I think that's such an optimistic way of looking at it. How would you define physical health?
Physical health for me is a little bit more concrete. So for me, physical health is the experience of well-being.
Hmm.
Okay, so the really like a tangible experience that life is going well, right?
Hmm.
The well being, along with, let's say, vitality, or
Right.
the presence of, say, energy or
Mhm.
something like that, right? So one is in the body, and it's the experience of not being limited and feeling good in your body. And then the other one would be more of a sense or an experience of well being. That's how I would define it.
Right. Yeah. How, I guess, how would someone then kind of know if they were physically healthy? Like, if you kind of define it that way, how is that something that someone might be able to sense either a problem in or a lack there, a lack thereof?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question. I think unfortunately, I think for a lot of people they don't really discover what physical wellness is
Mm,
until they begin to lose it, or there's kind of a they go down a path where they feel unwell, or they feel
right. Yeah.
disconnected, or
Hmm.
something like that. And then when it clicks again, it's unmistakable, right? So once you've lost it, it's easy to identify. Wow, clarity of mind, feeling of
Mm,
of optimism, the experience of that you're headed down a path that you enjoy. I
mhm.
think those things are often easier to understand or pick up when there's been a lack of that at some point.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Yeah, for sure. How do you feel that physical health relates to personal development?
physical health relates to personal. I mean, I think that they're intricately interwoven. I would say that they're kind of two sides of one coin.
Hmm.
Um, oftentimes, oftentimes we do silo them, and I
Yeah.
think that that's a mistake. I think that personal development is something that can lead to a greater sense of control, like you were saying earlier, a greater sense
Hmm.
of empowerment, a greater sense of purpose. And oftentimes the physical health can really aid in that process, right? It's very difficult to feel empowered if your body doesn't feel good, and if you don't have energy, and if you have
Yeah.
brain fog and things like that, right?
Hmm.
And it's not just having physical health, right? You also want to be developing yourself personally and headed towards, you know,
Hmm.
a telos is a Greek term that is kind of like your self actualization, let's say.
Right.
So I think having both of those dynamics be interwoven is something that's very important for a life well lived.
Yeah, and I think like it's like a sum of moving parts thing, right? Like if one thing isn't quite working right, then you're not going to be able to function everywhere else almost. Like it just gets harder. I guess when you're, how do I phrase this? When you're targeting one problem, you don't really have enough time to focus on the other things that are working maybe at 70% capacity, for
Sure.
example.
Yeah, just like in any area of your life, if you're always putting out fires, it's very
Mm,
hard. You always have there's not enough energy to then be in creation mode, right? So you don't want
yeah.
to be in a situation where you're putting out fires all the time, because you don't have energy at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. Now, we've talked a bit about, I guess, the challenges that can inhibit someone from attaining personal development or achieving that.
Hmm.
Um, what are the challenges with someone kind of improving and managing their physical health?
Uh, Interesting question, because I think it's tied into the personal development part, right?
Hmm.
Oftentimes, our limiting beliefs, especially around time,
Yeah.
and energy, right?
Hmm.
In my personal opinion, time is a conversation, right? It's not something that actually exists. It's something that we can measure on a clock, but oftentimes it's a conversation that we have. And I think that the biggest challenge is thinking that you have to give up something in order to have the other one, right? Like
Right.
you have to give up being successful in order to be more fit, or you have to that you have to give up something, right?
Mm.
That you can't have them both. Oftentimes people say, I don't have time to work out, or I don't have time to go to the grocery store. I don't have the time to meditate. I don't have time to do these things. But if
Hmm.
they were actually doing them, they would have a lot more time, because they would be much more productive. They'd be much more connected. They'd be much more in touch with their purpose.
Mm.
So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is thinking that you have to give up being productive in order to be well.
Yeah, I feel like yeah, we focus so much on productivity, we just don't realize how important being like just healthy and well is in helping us actually be as productive as we'd like. I know for me, often like I feel like I'm giving up sleep in order to, get things done. And I think that's pretty common around a lot of people. That's what they tend to give up. But it is so dangerous to be sleeping less than usual.
Yeah, I mean, 100 million%. Sleep
Mm.
is probably, I mean, all the studies that have come out recently show that sleep is the most, it's number one. So
Mhm.
if you can optimize for one thing, it should be sleep. I mean, that has a huge, it has a huge role to play in all areas of your life. When you don't
Mhm.
sleep enough, your DNA literally begins to fade over time.
Mhm.
And so if you go enough nights without getting enough sleep, and you're sacrificing sleep in order to get things done, there is a huge there's a huge risk that happens over time. I actually am working on a paper right now called Human Flourishing, and the difference is versus human optimization versus human flourishing. And human
Mm.
optimization is this insane trend that we've seen towards to optimize for productivity.
Mhm.
And a lot of the younger kids are um, the most guilty of this, right? You have this
Yeah.
whole generation of burnout. They call it burnout culture, literally.
Mhm.
And it's people who are like working themselves to death, for to use a for a lack of a better term. And I think I think it's a huge mistake. I think human flourishing, which is more holistic and looking at optimizing, multiple areas of your life, I think
Mhm.
that is a much more worthy um, game to play.
Mm. How do people perhaps begin to reprioritize their life and reprioritize their health?
Um, so that's something that I work on with every client, right? This is the number
Mhm.
one thing that we work on.
Mhm.
The advice always is schedule in your health routine, schedule in your family or your key relationships, and you schedule in time for your mental health and things like that. So you put it, we call them big rocks. So you put the big rocks in first in your schedule, and then you schedule the rest of your work around those things. I've been an entrepreneur since I was like 15 years old, and the tendency is to give up sleep, is to give up time, is to give up vacations, is to give up all of that in order to produce and to be able to build something, which is
Mhm.
admirable. But ultimately, it will end up having diminishing returns over time. So that's really the key that I always work with people, is put in the big rocks first, and then you schedule the rest of your life around the critical things. The
Mm.
first things that go out are time with your wife, or time with your kids, time at the gym, time
Yeah.
meditation. Those are often the first things that go out in service of whatever productivity based things are there, and it's a huge mistake.
So you mentioned, time with the family, and time with, spent on your relationships. Would you consider that kind of an aspect of like physical health as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, their physical health has, multiple components. And I
Hmm.
would say that a spiritual, let's say spiritual practice,
Hmm.
right? I would not divorce that or separate that from physical health. There is
Right.
an alignment between these things that when they're in alignment, you are physically well. I mean, yoga, right? Let's take yoga,
Mm.
right? My wife is actually a yoga instructor.
Hmm.
Yoga literally means union, and it's the unification of your physical body with whatever you call the spiritual dimension. So
Hmm.
they think about that as a, let's say, a continuum, right? They're not separated, and I think that is a much more healthy perspective to think of those things on the same continuum.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think like we are so I myself am so guilty of like neglecting, relationships and kind of being like, "Oh, I don't have time for that right now, later." And it's so difficult to kind of tell myself that like I should actually be making time for this because it will actually make me feel better,
Yeah.
especially during the week and that kind of thing. In terms of, I guess, going back to how to prioritize putting those big rocks in, something that, like, I guess people find it very difficult is often they will put work first. What do you tell kind of your clients or people that you chat to? How do you get them away from that mindset?
Well, I think it's focusing on what they want, right?
Mhm.
Instead of having it be, um, you know, a tangible thing in terms of
Mhm.
like more money, whatever the case may be, right? Why do you
Mhm.
want that? Sometimes you hear people talk about their why, right? Finding your deep why, something like that.
Mhm.
It's often buried underneath of what you're doing. So people
Mhm.
focus so much on the what, which is the activities, the physical things that they want, that they don't really spend a lot of time figuring out why. Why is that
Mhm.
important?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of times, if you do that deeper work, you'll discover that you're actually sacrificing the thing, the deeper reasons why you're doing the things that you're doing. You're actually sacrificing the reason why you're doing those things in the first place. So exactly what you said, reprioritizing is a process of getting clear for yourself. What do you want? What's the time frame that you want it in, and why is it
Mhm.
important? Right? Because
Mhm.
oftentimes the deeper why is much more motivating, right? It's much more driving, and there are often other ways to get the why than just the what and what people are already doing. So it's very important, I think, that people look, based on what you're doing. You're just going to keep getting more of the same if you keep doing the same things. So
Yeah.
if you're looking for more, let's say more fulfillment,
Mhm.
then just optimizing for productivity is not going to do that. You need to play golf if that makes you happy. My wife has started painting recently, and like she loves that, makes her happy.
Mhm.
And now, if you're looking for pure optimization, would you spend time painting? Not the logical mind, but the thing is, the happier that you are, the more productive, the more useful that you are.
Mhm.
So I think it's a matter of understanding that you know being human is much deeper than what we produce.
Mhm.
So that's the number one thing that we work on actually with people is you know discovering that process, and oftentimes it's very uncomfortable because when people look at their life, they realize that they're not paying attention to the things that in their heart are the most important to them.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like that would take a lot of not just time, but like mental effort and emotional effort to like reframe. You're reframing essentially your entire life and what
For
you
sure.
thought you believed for a very long time.
100%.
Mm. In terms of kind of you know, a lot of people are very, very busy nowadays. Even though we just had, a pandemic or whatever, people are still busy at home.
Uh-huh.
So, what kind of habits can people employ to kind of allow them to think about these things?
Yeah. I mean, look, busy is an interesting word, right? I don't
Mm,
my clients are not allowed to use that word. It's
right.
literally a story that has a negative vibration attached to it, and
Mm-hmm.
it is literally a trance that people will put them in. And you'll
Mm-hmm.
notice, when do people mention that they're busy, right? They mention that when they're stressed out, overwhelmed, and they're trying to back you off, right? It's
Mm.
almost like a precursor, like, don't ask me to do anything, right? I'm busy.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
hey, did you get a chance to do that? Instead of dealing with, yes, I did, or, no, I didn't, right? There's some sort of lack of integrity there. They'll just throw busy at you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not an empowering framework.
Yeah.
So as a different framework, we have the concept of plan your work, work your plan. And
Mm.
what that means is you spend time focusing on setting up what it is that what is that you want. So generally we just work on 1 week at a time, right? So we call it unfolding, meaning you stand in the creation of the thing that you want, and then you work backwards from there. And then in there, you have your workout time, you have your time with the family, you have all of those things that are built in, right? That are
Right.
already there. And
Mhm.
then when it comes through going through your week, the challenge becomes, do not change your schedule, right?
Right.
Don't throw out time with the kids because your work went over. It really is
Mm.
like training yourself to honor your agreements to yourself and also to the people in your life, versus being at the effect of your circumstances, right? Busyness is when people are at the effect of their schedule and the things that are going on in their life. And there's absolutely no power there. If you'll
Mm.
notice, people that are insanely productive, generally speaking, it's because they've mastered this game, right? Richard Branson goes swimming, while he's building rockets to the moon and all of those things, right?
Mm.
Because he's built a team around him, and he has a system for how to control time, right? He's not controlled by time. He's in control of time, meaning he's organizing his life in the way that he wants it. So
Mm.
that it's a challenge, right? But Google Calendar, man, it works.
Yeah, like this definitely wouldn't happen overnight. And I'm guessing it would take people like a long time to figure out something that actually works for them.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you have everything that you have in your life right now is a function and an outcome of the way that you've approached your life up till now. And oftentimes, we're very attached to the way that we already do things, because we feel like, if I were to not do that, I would be out of control, right? So it literally is a process of rewiring your mind and the way that you approach things. So giving up what you already know and being willing to discover something newly.
Mm. And I love what you said earlier about, not being controlled by your schedule and controlling it yourself. I think that's something that that's a way of thinking of it that I've never thought about before, and I think might actually help me get control of my own schedule. So thank you for that. Moving on to kind of our practice slash habit segment, which is where we talk about something that our listeners can actually do in order to kind of little things that they might be able to do to help become physically healthy.
Hmm.
So what would you recommend as a practice or habit that someone, especially, I know we said we don't like the word busy, but someone who might not feel like they have a lot of time on their hands, what might they do?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of them. First of all, I think habits are absolutely critical, right? Aristotle said thousands and thousands of years ago that literally you become what your character is an outgrowth of what you do habitually. And so I believe our lives are a result of things that we do habitually. So if you're going to change anything, you have to change things that you do daily.
Yeah.
Um, I think that there are a few things that anybody can do that are free, and they have probably the most. They can create the biggest results,
Hmm.
and they are, for me. There, you mentioned it earlier, right? Sleeping effectively. So, and again, it's always about deconstructing any habit, right? So if you're going to sleep well, I learned this from Tim Ferriss, by the way. So if anybody if you don't know Tim Ferriss, he wrote the 4 Hour Work Week, the 4 Hour Body, the 4 Hour Chef. He's a
Hmm.
genius. and his biggest gift is to deconstruct habits. Right, he takes the people that are the best in the world at a particular thing and deconstruct it. So with sleep, you got to have the right, temperature in the room. You want to have like eye masks or blacked out room. And the number one thing is you got to make sure that you turn your devices or your whatever digital products that you use off at a particular time, so that you can be asleep at a certain time. And then the key is waking up at the same time every day. So if, for example, you need to catch up on sleep, never sleep in. It's devastating. You want to just go to sleep earlier. Really, you want to wake up at the same time every day. So I think sleep is a critical one. The other two that are also super easy are fasting. If you, let's say you do, I've done intermittent fasting every day for the last 4.5 years. So here are the keys. The upside to fasting is you don't have to eat breakfast. And if you get really good at it, like me, you don't even have to eat lunch, right? So you're cutting out two periods of time where you could be doing other things, and also you actually get a lot more energy. So fasting, whether it's whether you do prolonged fasting or you do intermittent, like time restricted eating, those are two that's a simple thing that you can do that's free. And then the last one would be meditation, whether it's 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day. There's so many free apps that you can do, and there's probably nothing that has more direct impact on your physical and mental well-being than being able to, again, control the vibrations in your mind. Being able to, your mind is the creator of everything, right? Including the things that you don't want. And most of the time we're always focusing on the things that we don't want. And we are constantly creating more of the things that we don't want. And meditation is the process of stopping and just noticing what is in your thoughts, and then being able to just let go of the ones that are not serving you. And most people don't do that. They're just run constantly by the thoughts that they're having and thinking that those are real.
Yeah.
So
I want to talk a bit more about meditation, because it's something that I often struggle to pick up as a practice. I've tried so many times, but it's just for whatever reason not sticking. What would you say to someone to convince them that meditation is the way?
Well, I mean, first of all, learning about why meditation is something that you should do. I think that's critical. Same with fasting, to be honest. When people see that their cognitive health can increase, that they can lose weight, they'll have more energy. Their brain will start producing more what they call BDNF, which is like essentially neurotransmitters in your mind. All of that just by doing this one simple thing. People are like, okay, if you say do fasting and what they hear is, don't eat, nobody wants to do that. Right. But if they know what the benefits are, same thing with meditation. The scientific evidence for why meditation is important is unbelievable. I mean, things that monks have been talking about for thousands of years are now demonstratable empirically using EEG machines and hooking up to people's brains. So that's really the number one thing, is connecting it to what they want. And all human behavior is belief driven. So if you want someone to do something or to see something as valuable, you got to connect it to what they want. Right. And most people, if you ask them, they're overworked, they're overstressed, they feel out of control, and they just want some peace of mind in their life. And meditation is by far the number one thing that you can do to achieve all of those things.
Yeah, it's definitely powerful. What are kind of 3 good things? You've already talked about a lot of good things about meditation, but what are kind of the 3 best things that you would find, that you have found about it?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I think the reduction of anxiety, right?
That's
Very
a big one
tangible.
that I think a lot of people need.
Yeah. I mean, since the pandemic, we've never seen a global crisis around mental health like we have right now. So I think reduction of anxiety, the reduction of, even some people deal with depression, the reduction of those symptoms. the feeling of well-being that I mentioned earlier, which is one of the critical components of health and wellness, in my opinion, is something that is directly connected to meditation. People
Right.
that do meditation regularly, even if it's for short periods of time, the number one thing that they report is a reduction in anxiety and an increased sense of well-being. And
Mm-hmm.
when you have an increased sense of well-being, everything else in your life will be much more likely to fall into place. So those two things, and then I think the other two I would say are sleep. Right, you're much more likely to sleep better when you're able to get into what they call like an alpha and a delta and a theta brainwave, and then thinking clearly,
Mm-hmm.
cognitive function. You know, I can't tell you how many people come to me and the what they want is more energy, and they want to feel like they can focus. We have a what I would say a crisis in attention
Mm-hmm.
going on in the world because of social media and different things. And don't get me wrong, I love social media. It's got a lot of upsides, but the stimulus response that young people are dealing with right now has a devastating impact on anxiety and the capacity to focus on one task for more than 30 seconds.
Yeah, I definitely, as someone who didn't really grow up with social media, but kind of found it in my later adolescence, um, I can definitely understand that. Yeah, it has ruined my attention span for sure. So yeah, I do get that. In terms of, I guess, we talked a little bit, but what are kind of the challenges that people find in like taking up meditation as something that they need to do?
Well, I mean, I think we've touched on it. I think people's number one thing is the two things that I hear the most are I don't have time
Mm,
and I can't sit still, right?
yeah.
People really, Blaise Pascal was a famous philosopher. He said that all of the problems in humanity are a result of man's inability to sit quietly in a room by himself. He said himself, but we would now say oneself.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's a big part of it. People are unnerved by dealing with themselves. And
Mhm,
when they start getting present to how the little voice in their head is always going, it's always chattering.
mhm,
That can be very confronting for people. I think so. I think those are the two main things: is having them understand that there is no right way of doing meditation. It's not about emptying your mind. You will never achieve that.
mhm.
Um, and that you can really fit it in you can fit in 5, 10, 15 minutes for meditation every day.
Mhm, mhm. When you said it's not about emptying your mind, what would you say it's about then?
Paying attention to your mind.
Paying attention.
So meditation, oftentimes, there are people who have been meditating for decades who, will report that they have a sense of emptiness of the mind. But these are enlightened beings. The intention of meditation is about being aware of
Mm,
what is going on, because the more that you notice the thoughts that you are having,
mhm,
and as long as you don't resist them, right? So that's really the task of meditation. Notice what's there and then don't resist what's there. It
mhm,
will just float away. Like if you have a thought and you don't try to resist having that thought, it will float away. So
mhm.
meditation is not about emptying your mind. It's about noticing what's already there.
Right, right. How often should someone practice meditation if they were to take it up?
I mean, the science shows that. I mean, look, if you can do meditation for long periods of time every day, you're going to get exponential results. There's no
Right.
doubt about that,
Yeah.
right? If you do TM and other kind of mantra based meditations, a lot of the research has shown 20 minutes twice a day. So kind of
Mhm,
bookending your day, in the morning and then at night during a wind down, or, in the morning and then at lunchtime. A lot of times people will just go into a little room. Those seem to have the best results. Is twice daily for short periods of time.
What do you mean by TM? What exactly is that in
Sorry,
your oh,
sorry, yeah, I'm using lingo. So that's called transcendental meditation, and
right.
it's something that was made famous by a gentleman named David Lynch, and
Hmm.
some like
Not the
Jerry Simon.
director, right?
Yes,
The director?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the David Lynch Foundation is probably they're probably the biggest proponent of TM in the world. So
Right.
he got like Jerry Seinfeld,
Oh,
very 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 famous people. Russell Brand is now a big proponent of transcendental meditation.
right.
Essentially, it's just a method of meditating. It's
Mm.
mantra based, and so yeah, that's TM is mantra based meditation.
Right, right. So there's like different forms that people can take, and there's no kind of right way to do it. It's just kind of what works for you.
Yeah, I mean, I say when people first start, if doing guided meditations are easier for you, just do that.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
always say the best type of meditation is the one that you're going to do, and the one that you're
Mm.
going to do is oftentimes the one that has the less resistance involved. So do whatever works for you. I was trained in Vipassana, and Vipassana is like it starts off being a 10-day silent meditation retreat where they teach you a body scan technique. So instead of a mantra based technique, you're literally scanning your body. But
Mhm.
the idea is similar, which is you want to find a singleness of focus, whether you focus on a candle or you focus on a particular part of your body or you focus on a particular mantra or you focus on someone else's voice through a guided meditation. It's singleness of focus is what the training is.
Right,
There's
right.
lots of different ways to do it.
Hmm. Um, you mentioned, there's different forms and people set up a different time to do it based on what form. If someone was to do, a 10-minute or 5 to 10 minute guided meditation, what
Mhm.
is kind of the best time to do something like that? When is it most effective?
I mean, it's probably the most effective. I would say that there would be two times. One is first thing in the morning, right?
Hmm.
So the more, a lot of the spiritual traditions will wake up at like, 4 or 5 in the morning, because it's prior to the little voice in your head kicking in with all the things that, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do this. There is a particular vibrational frequency that's present in the morning that diminishes as the day goes on.
Hmm.
So morning time would be the best time to do that. Um, the next best time would be any other time, or if you're feeling very scattered, that's a
Right.
time to just stop, find your center, and just release whatever the obsessive sort of thinking is. So I
Mm.
would say those are the two times that would be the most you get the most out of them.
This is going to be a stupid question, but
Are no stupid questions.
what if you were to fall asleep during your meditation? Is that something we should be ashamed about, or is that something that we should just allow to happen?
Okay. It's funny that you said ashamed. It's like my number one thing that I work with people is actually getting rid of guilt and shame. As someone who dealt with addiction for a long time, the number one thing that causes people to do more of the things that they don't want is guilt and shame.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of what you said in particular, there's no problem if you fall asleep, right? Ultimately, it's not the it's not the intention of meditation. But there's nothing. I mean, if you fall asleep while you're meditating, it probably just means you need to you're lacking sleep, um,
Yeah.
and you'll wake up feeling rested. So I would never worry about that. It's not a problem.
Okay. Well, that should settle a few people down if they feel like it's something that they keep doing. Um, how do you feel like meditation impacts your personal development or perhaps your perception in life?
Wow. I mean, in terms of perception in life, I believe that mindfulness is
Mhm.
probably, if we prioritized one thing as a
Mhm.
human species, um, I think mindfulness would have the highest returns. Because most of the time we go around we live someone else's narrative, and we live our life by someone else's plan. And oftentimes we don't realize it until it's too late, right? A midlife crisis is literally, you've heard that phrase, right? It's literally
Yeah.
someone who's been driven by a narrative that's not theirs. And then they realize, oh my God, I've given up all of this time and I'm not living, my own life. I think that meditation is going to be the thing that has the biggest capacity for you to examine the thoughts that you already have. And it's going to expand your ability for self-awareness. And I just believe that self-awareness is the number one thing. We just need, we don't need, but it's the thing that's worth devoting your whole life to, if you're going to die and feel really good about the way that you lived your life, being self-aware is going to have a huge place in that. So I think that, I think it has a huge impact on personal development, and I think it has a huge impact on perspective. And I don't think that I could say that more strongly. Like, I really do believe that meditation has the capacity for a transformation in life.
You were mentioning like looking back on your life and feeling like you lived a good life. You can't really know that you have lived a good life unless you're aware of what actually happened or what you actually did, I suppose.
And if you think about that in the macrocosm, each day is a microcosm of that, right?
Mm.
And if you start journaling, right, it's another great practice, and you're not aware of really what you're doing and why you're doing it each day, then you're living someone else's life, And so a day well spent is a day done intentionally, right? You are doing the things that you want to do, and you're doing them on purpose because you're choosing to do them. And the flip side of that is you're not living by choice. And that's not a life.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. You mentioned journaling, but kind of in your experience, do you have any kind of other practices or habits that you would combine with meditation in order to kind of make the most out of it?
Yeah, right. I mean, writing. I mean, I think I don't know do you know who Jordan Peterson is?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Jordan Peterson is someone who's exploded on the scene in the last couple of years. But one of the things I did one of his programs, which is called self-authoring program. And one of the things I've taken away from Jordan is critical thinking is a byproduct oftentimes of writing and getting clear about what you actually think. Very few people spend time examining their own thoughts and getting clear about what they actually think. And I think if you take time to meditate and then you take what you're discovering for yourself, like bring an intention into meditation. Let's say today I want to bring the intention of feeling love and having the experience of gratitude, right? And I bring that into a meditation. And then I unpack what I discovered for myself in that meditation through writing. I think that our capacity for critical thinking is going to skyrocket and to think clearly. And I don't think that people think very clearly.
Yeah,
That's
I
why
think
I
that
think philosophy is good. Whether people do it as an academic discipline like I did is a totally different story. But critical thinking and writing and storytelling, if kids had more of that, I think it would be amazing.
yeah, for sure. I think like writing stuff down it can help solidify as well kind of the thoughts in your head. It makes it almost impossible to escape, and you have to acknowledge them.
Yeah, and if you've seen any of the data on the difference between someone who says their goals and writes down their goals, I mean, it's like it's unbelievable. There's something magical that happens when you take a thought and you speak it and then you write it. There's something alchemical that happens where it literally manifestation is much more likely, and it's much faster when you're able to write that thing down.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree. I think that's something that, I have employed. And journaling, I was about to say journalism, that's a very different thing. Journaling is, I think, becoming a lot more popular as well nowadays. I think people are realizing the benefits of it. So I guess moving on, we've got some questions from our audience that they've sent in.
Okay.
These are a very, very wide range. Physical health is kind of all we told them. And obviously, everyone's got a very different interpretation of what that means. So we've got a very wide range of questions. I guess the most interesting one I found is how do you differentiate between exercise, physical training, and fitness? How do you differentiate between all of those things?
Exercise, physical training, and
Hmm.
fitness.
Yes.
Okay. Um, I mean, exercise would be very general,
Hmm.
right? So going for a walk is exercising, yoga is exercising. Um, Physical training is, I mean, if by that you mean strength training, um, then I would say super critical, very different than other things. Probably the thing that has the most, probably has the most return on energy is strength training. If I could recommend anything to people in the area of, let's say, fitness, exercise, strength training, you always want to error in the direction of strength training. It increases bone density, increases muscle mass. Nothing keeps you younger longer than having lean muscle mass and having strong bones. So I think that's what I would say about that. And then the last one was just fitness. Yeah, I mean, I think fitness is more along the lines of having stamina and having more, let's say, overall fitness. you
Hmm.
know um I'll just give you an example. You can take someone who's very strong and you put them in a boxing ring, for example. I used to do a lot of boxing, and they're going to be devastated, right?
Yeah.
And so the person is very strong, and so you might see this person is very fit, and then you'll find out very quickly that that's not the case, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
if you look at a CrossFit athlete, oftentimes they're much more dynamic, right? They have an incredible balance of, let's say, fitness and strength training or personal training. So those two elements are things that combine synergistically, but they're not the same. They work on different systems of the body.
Hmm. Another really interesting question is how important is mental health in maintaining physical health?
I mean, I think it's critical.
Mm,
If you look at the difference, if we just take athletes, right? The difference between an elite level athlete and your average athlete is their mindset.
right. Yeah.
It's their mental health. If you there's just no doubt about that. Like, the physical side of things is critical in the sense of fitness, working out, like having a strong physique, like things like that, right? But the mental health will trump your physical health all day long, every day.
Yeah.
And because it also takes a tremendous amount of mental health to stay disciplined and to have
Yeah.
and to reach peak physical fitness.
Yeah.
So I think that you can't underestimate the impact of mental health on physical on
Mm.
physical performance.
And going off what we were talking about earlier as well about, being mentally well allows us to just approach everything else so much easier. It's so important.
Yeah, and I think more than anything else, the ability to deal with obstacles and setbacks. Anytime you're dealing with anything that is worth doing, you're going to bump up against obstacles, setbacks, injuries, things like that. Ryan Holiday, who's one of my favorite authors, very clear writer. He wrote a book called "The Obstacle Is the Way," based on kind of old Stoic practices, and that is how I think of the intersection between physical and mental health is that you go to elite levels of anything when you have perseverance and you have a very strong mindset, right? Angela Duckworth wrote an amazing book called Grit, and grit is it's basically a formula that has to do with persistence and the ability to overcome challenges and obstacles in life. And what she discovered after years of research of military athletes, people that were at the highest level of athletic endeavors, is that the thing, and sorry, an academic success, the thing that was the number one separator was what she called grit, but it was essentially having an incredibly strong mindset.
Right, right. Um, what, how can I find time? I mean, this is, I guess, what we talked about this entire show, but to put it
Mhm.
into kind of more succinct words, how do I find the time to stay healthy in a busy schedule? Two
You'll
words there
never
I know
find,
that we hate.
yeah, I mean, you'll never find the time to do anything in your life.
Mhm,
Time, if you're going around looking for time, you'll never find it, right? You'll find an
mhm,
endless amount of other stuff that people want you to do, things that
mhm.
are, Stephen Covey in Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, he's got 4 grids, right? And most people spend most of their time doing things that seem urgent and are not important, right? And then
Mhm,
you have things that are urgent, things that are important, right? Like that. And
mhm,
oftentimes we spend all of our time in the quadrant doing things that are urgent, meaning they're like a fire to put out, and they're not important. And oftentimes there's someone else's agenda, right? Most of the time
yeah.
people go around actioning things that are urgent for someone else.
Mhm,
Um, so you'll never find time to do anything. Time
mhm.
is something that is a creation. So if you want, and you've probably heard this being said many times, but you will always make the time to do things that are important to you. So, all you can do is create. So if you want to be healthy, you have to carve out the time. You have
Mhm,
to schedule it in, making sure, so many people think that scheduling and discipline and organization is means a lack of spontaneity, and so
yeah.
people will resist scheduling things, and the reality is the exact opposite. The more regimented you are, the more scheduling, the more scheduled that you are, the more you know when you have time to do things. You know when the white spaces are on your calendar, and you
Sure.
can schedule in vacations. You can schedule in time with your family. You can schedule in time with your friends.
Mm.
Making sure those things happen. So yeah, that would be my answer. Is you're never gonna find time to do anything.
You
It's a
kind of have to
creation.
make the time. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Another question is, how do I begin to start eating healthy?
You begin to start eating healthy by not eating things that are in a box, a can, or come from a restaurant.
Mhm,
Michael Pollan wrote a book called Eat Real Food, Mostly Plants. I think that was the name of the
mhm,
book.
mhm.
And the key takeaway that I got from the book, he's an amazing researcher, by the way. He said that after all the research that was done, the one thing that made the biggest difference in people's health was cooking their own food,
Right, right.
because you know what's going in it, you know what's not in it. You're
Mm,
not using preservatives and lots of other things. So I would say that is the first thing is stop eating processed foods. If it's in a
mhm,
package or it's in a box or it's in a can, it is probably not good for you. In
mm,
that book, he said food is meant to be an ingredient,
mhm.
not have ingredients, right? So if you're eating a lot of things that have ingredients, you're not eating real food. So eat real
Right.
food.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's pretty good advice. This is not a listed question, but I am thinking about my brother who wants to eat healthy but cannot cook to save his life. What
Hmm.
can people like that do in order to
Yeah, I
become
mean,
healthy eaters?
Yeah, look, I think in this day and age, there is kind of like this double-edged sword where people are starting to realize that your fast food restaurants and things like that have caused a tremendous amount of sickness in our,
Hmm.
I'll just speak for America. They call it SAD, the
Yeah.
standard American diet. Um,
Hmm.
on the other hand, there are a lot of, let's say, conscious companies that are starting to come out. If you look at companies like Chipotle and Panera, a lot of these, Whole Foods is a big brand here in the U.S.
Hmm.
There is because of awareness. This is the good part of social media, by the way. Companies can't hide, right? People put them on blast constantly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the good side of that is you do have a lot of eco-friendly and health conscious companies that are not able to get away with the same nonsense that they used to. So eat in places if you really can't cook. We have a company called HelloFresh that drops off um, fresh ingredients with like a what are
I
they
think we
like?
have HelloFresh in Australia as well. Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Yeah,
we
it's
have here
got it.
too.
They literally take like 10 minutes. Like all of their
Yeah.
meals take between like 10 and 15 minutes. They give you all of the food and they give you like step-by-step instructions for cooking. So if you can't cook, learn to cook because it will extend the quality of your life dramatically.
Okay, so if my brother is listening, the advice is learn how to cook and stop asking other people
Learn
to cook for you.
learn how to cook, bro.
For
Learn how to cook,
sure.
bro.
I will very enthusiastically pass this information on to him. Um, uh, Another question is should we eat before or after exercise, and what should we be eating?
So you mean for performance in particular and like recovery and
Hmm.
stuff?
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one. So there's kind of two approaches. One is like I said earlier, I do fasting every day. So
Yeah.
I work out fasted.
Okay.
It actually creates let's say like less power, less speed when you're doing your exercises, but your body is producing a tremendous amount of growth hormone. So if you want to build a lot of, let's say, lean muscle mass, work out fasted, right? You're going to burn tremendous amounts of fat, tremendous amounts of calories, and your body is producing growth hormone, which will help
Hmm.
you build lean muscle mass.
Hmm.
So that would be one strategy, is work out fasted so you don't eat.
Okay.
And then you have a very short window actually after you eat to consume food. So you want to consume things that are that have protein. That would be a critical
Hmm.
thing, right? After you work out, things that have your amino acids, things that have protein, and you probably want to stay away from simple carbohydrates as much as possible. If you're going to eat a lot of carbohydrates after working out, is a time to do that because you're going to metabolize them very quickly. But also, sugar or simple carbohydrates actually open up your cells. So after you work out, if you do take a simple carbohydrate, if you do take, like, let's say, fat with it, it sucks right into the cells. Um,
Right. Right.
so I would say either work out fasted, or, if you're going to have something like a simple carbohydrate, something like that, eat before you work out. It will help with, speed, explosion, things like that. Mostly just stay away from simple carbohydrates.
Hmm.
But if you're going to feed before you work out, then just a balance of carbohydrates coming from plants, protein, whether you eat them, primarily a plant source of protein. Plants are a great source of protein,
Hmm.
and fat. So a nice balance between complex carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Actually, every meal should be that, to be honest. A
Right.
balance
Yeah.
between good fats, um, quality protein, and complex carbohydrates.
Complex carbohydrates, for sure. Final question, and this is a really interesting one. How do we meditate when we are busy parents and with kids around?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean,
Mm.
you just have to do it intentionally, right? So if the kid, you just got to let the kids know, mommy and daddy are going to be, being away for 15 minutes, or put them in the crib or, put them somewhere where they're not going to be, harming themselves or whatever.
Yeah.
And carve that out, or do it before they wake up, do it while they're eating. Finding those pockets where you can be undisturbed, those are critical. My
Mm.
favorite hack when it comes to meditation is do it at the same time every day. Make it literally an
Mm.
association in your mind where you're doing it at the exact same time every day. So it might be
Mm.
wake up, meditate, then shower, then eat, then like that. So if you make it the number one priority, then it will, you'll have that time.
Mm.
Um, so, I mean, everybody's got to navigate this. Life has its own challenges. But
Yeah.
the key is it's worth it. So find what works for you. That you have Insight Timer is a great app. Calm is a great app. Waking Up by Sam Harris, who's one of my favorite authors, an incredible thinker, human being. He's got a great app as well. There's a lot of really amazing apps where you can, 10, 15 minutes, you're in and out.
Yeah, I think that's one of the benefits of kind of the digitization of everything is that there's an app for that, which means things that might have seemed a bit far-fetched before are so easily accessible now. I think that's something that I really like. One of the good things.
For sure.
So that brings us to the end of our questions from the audience.
Okay.
Now we have the open mic session in which you can kind of talk about anything that you're passionate about. That's either that's somewhat relevant to our topic, but maybe you haven't had the chance to cover so far today. Did you have something in mind so far?
Um, so I mean, just anything that has to do with like health or physical health,
Yeah,
that things that
yeah.
people might want to do. I mean, going back to personal development and also physical health,
Mhm.
I think that the easiest thing that people can do to have them have a breakthrough in all of these areas is to get a coach or to put yourself into some sort of accountability program, something that
Mhm.
has accountability. As human beings, there's nothing that we resist more than accountability. And there's nothing that
Yeah,
helps us produce results faster than accountability, right? It doesn't matter whether you're Tiger Woods or the greatest athletes on the planet Earth. All of them have coaches. Usually they have a personal trainer, a nutritionist, a meditation coach,
yeah,
you know what I mean? They have coaches for every area of their life.
yeah, yeah,
So that's one thing that I would say is find a structured accountability program that you can put yourself in. I've used there's a company called Landmark, which they do professional and personal development. I did them starting in 2011 when I was first getting into my recovery process, started using their programs. And I've done, Tony Robbins and so many different programs that are out there. It's amazing people, Joe Dispenza, Tony Robbins. Do these types of courses that are, maybe not just a weekend, but something where you can get into a seminar, you have a coach, and you have someone that will work with you over an extended period of time. That is going to get you the most value for your money and get you the most return on your own personal investment of time is outsourcing. If you just notice, if you go to the gym by yourself and you go to the gym with a personal trainer, right?
yeah.
You're going to get a lot more out of every time that you work out if you have someone that's like, no, 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 one more.
Mm,
No, 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 one more. Right. And then you
yeah.
might wake up on a Wednesday, oh, I don't feel like going. Right. But if you know that you're meeting your personal trainer there, you're going to go. You're not going to
Mm.
text them and be like, hey, I'm not feeling it. They're going to be like, suck it up, you know? But if you don't have that, you're very likely to not do the things that you want to be doing. So that has always been my rule of thumb. If I want to write a book, if I want to create a podcast, if I want to do anything, I got to find a way that my butt is on the line and I'm accountable to someone else and
Yeah.
not just to myself.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's also, for a lot of people, those feelings of self-doubt, like, am I doing it right? Or like,
Sure.
am I kind of going in the right direction? Is this actually working for me? Having a coach out there and someone else to kind of put things in perspective can really benefit you.
yeah, I mean, you can't imagine how just hearing you're doing a great job and keep going.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are so stressed out. You just tell them that, they'll burst into tears because no one gives them acknowledgement or tells them, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, for sure.
Just a little bit of encouragement, can go a long way, so surround yourself with cheerleaders, man.
Accountability and encouragement, both really, really important. But thank you so much for joining me today on the show, Nathan. It was really, really lovely to have you. Where can we find you?
So you can find me on all of Instagram, Nathan ZP McCullough. Rising Phoenix Wellness is the name of my health coaching brand, also on Instagram. Same thing on TikTok. Same thing on Facebook, Nathan McCullough. So I'm basically the same thing everywhere. I don't use Twitter, but those are and same on YouTube. I have a lot of content and long form podcast type stuff there. So yeah, if you're interested in personal development or recovery stuff or, any kind of health and wellness stuff, I'm kind of the same guy everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Our listeners will probably be switching into your channel as soon as they're done with this one. Thank you again for joining us today. It was really, really lovely to speak to you.
It is my pleasure, and I appreciate the time for you guys to have me on. And I acknowledge you for what you guys are doing. The world needs education and encouragement, and there's nothing that's more important than mental and physical health. So I really acknowledge what you guys are doing, and I'm happy to have come on and be a little slice of the difference that you're making.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate it.
Awesome.
You've been listening to Self-Improvement Atlas, the personal science insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. For more episodes like this from 10 different life management perspectives, search LMSL on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so you can get updated on everything we have to offer. We have a wide range of topics readily available for you to check out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can also be found on our website at pe.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Aditi Kutty. Thanks for tuning in.